So welcome once again. There's lots of familiar names coming back each morning. So thank you for joining us every morning this week. We are almost at the end of week 1 of our virtual challenge, and can I just say it has been so exciting to watch. Just watch everybody get out and about moving. It's been a really cold week for us. I'm sure it's been a cold week for you guys. And so just seeing everybody get up and clock those kilometres has been wonderful. The other great thing that we've been watching is the fundraising. And collectively, this group has raised over $70,000 so far. So thank you, thank you, thank you. We are just so grateful, and it's just amazing to see the activity that's happening out there. So we will have some announcements this morning. We've got a couple of fun prize packs for those that are leading the fundraising, and currently in the lead we've got Willie Molden, who is up over 7,000. So Willie's probably one of our oldest riders. He's ridden with his daughter. They've ridden close to 250 kilometres already this week, and he's raised over 7,000. So that's incredible. Following him in the female stakes, we've got Katie Dorset Lynn, who's up around the 5K mark. So just outstanding. And
Claire,
yeah,
Claire, sorry to interrupt you. I've just received a message from Troy Sachs. He says, "I'm here, but can't seem to log on."
Right.
So
okay.
That might be one for Pete, wherever he is.
Well, what I might do, I might hand you over to Pete, and I'll let you guys have a chat, and we'll work out where Troy is in the internet world.
Okay. Well, I'll take.
Thank you, T. Good morning, Tomo.
G'day, Pete.
This works out well because what we get to do is others get to hear about you and what took you into cycling and some of the fascinating experiences and personalities that you've met through your time at the Tour de France. But just a sidebar before we get started, we're talking yesterday about Willie and being our oldest rider, and Claire actually posed that would our chairman, Kay Spencer, be on? Would she be our oldest rider? And I said, well, that's not something you'd raise publicly, so it's not. I'm not going.
Hey.
So, Tomo, what took you into cycling? Was it sport? Was it just the journalism route that took you there and you ended up? How did you get onto your first trip to France to cover the greatest ride of all?
Well, Pete, it was a real fluke, to tell you the truth. I was never a cyclist, never had an interest in cycling, didn't understand it. Some might say I still don't understand it.
Yeah.
I'm sure I was a sports journalist when I first started my career in broadcasting, but I was really interested and loved the game of world football, soccer. And I fell into cycling, firstly by covering an event which doesn't exist anymore down the east coast of Australia called the Commonwealth Bank Cycle Classic. I can remember the boss coming into the office one day, the sports office, which was predominantly made up of soccer heads, football heads. And he said, look, we've got this event called the Bank Classic. Anybody interested in covering it? We're going to show daily highlights. We're going to come live, actually, cross live. We're going to do it live, half hour every day from 6 o'clock. And I looked around the room, nobody put their hand up. And I put my hand up, not necessarily reluctantly, but I saw it as an opportunity to get out of the office and report on stories that might be of interest to the viewer watching. As I say, I didn't know anything much about cycling, but I saw it as an opportunity to craft some human interest type stories, go behind the scenes. What does it take to make a cyclist tick? What does it make to get a bike race up and running? It was a multi-day bike race, a week long, which started in 1992 from Coffs Harbour and finished up in Canberra via Sydney and Wollongong. So I caught the bug there and then. I met people like Henk Vogels for the very first time, a few other personalities, Patrick Yonker, and these guys have become household names in Australian cycling and Australian sport ever since. And look, I covered that event for probably 8 years, but in 1996, SBS had the rights to the European Football Championships, and having covered the World Cup in '94 in the United States, I guess I was one of those who went to England to cover the European Football Championships as part of the SBS team. Now, during that time, I was based up in the north of England, in Manchester, Liverpool, Newcastle, and having an absolute ball of a time, interviewing a lot of my football heroes. And soccer really runs through my veins, even to this day. I grew up playing the sport from the age of 6 to 42. And to cut a long story short, at the time, the boss said to me, look, we've been showing the Tour de France for 4 years, but we really haven't covered it properly. We want you to go over to the Netherlands, where the tour starts this year, and we want you to Australianise the event for our audience. All you have to do is top and tail it, get a few interviews, chuck it into the half-hour program, and there you go. That was my very first tour. And from then, on the very first day, I remember arriving in Holland and thinking, wow, this is unbelievable. I have fallen in love with this thing straight away. And, well, the rest is history. I've been covering it now for 24 consecutive years. This year, we're doing it again when it starts, fingers crossed, in late August. I won't be going to France this year. We'll be doing it from the Sydney studio.
And Tomo, when you went over for that first trip, how big was the entourage that was there to look after you?
In terms of the SBS crew, there was just 3 of us. There was myself, a camera operator, and an audio operator, and everything was being gathered in France and in the Netherlands, as it was. The Grand Depart started there. We were there for 3 days before it entered France via Belgium. We were very small, and look, the people watching back home were very small in numbers. Virtually nobody was watching, and I can remember that at the time the boss saying, look, we could probably produce a program and send the packages out to our audiences, which was so small in numbers, via VHS copies, just record them on tape and post them out to our audience. That's how small it was. But look, management persisted. It persisted, management. I persisted. We persisted. We all persisted. We came back the following year. We came back the year after. And apart from that, back then, the tour was basically a French national race. Everything was released in French. English wasn't a spoken language. The releases were done in French. And look, what made it interesting for our audiences in Australia was the fact that many Australian cyclists were starting to appear. Robbie McEwen, Stuart O'Grady, Patrick Yonker, as a matter of fact, was one rider who I met earlier at the Commonwealth Bank Cycle Classic. He was in France competing for his respective team. So look, the list of Australian names started to increase in 2000. And apart from turning up, Pete, they were winning as well. They were getting yellow jerseys, stage wins. So what was traditionally a European event, a French race, had suddenly become a non-European event for Australians and Americans as well.
And I guess the first Australians to make a mark was Phil Anderson. Is that correct?
Well, Phil Anderson was before my time. He certainly did. He was the first non-European to wear the yellow jersey, the first Australian to win a host of stages back in the early 1980s. But he was the one that opened doors for the new wave of Australian riders that came over in the mid to late 1990s and beyond, well into the 21st century as well.
And how were you received as an Australian coming in by the French riders, the media, the public, the rest? For those who cycling was something that was within their DNA, how were you received?
Oh, Pete, at first we were a novelty for the Europeans. People were saying, what's this Australian crew doing over here covering our race? They welcomed us. They warmly welcomed us, and they actually loved the fact that an Australian crew would travel some 12,000 kilometres to France to report on their race, because everyone in Europe knows that we are a country made up of Australian rules football, cricket, and rugby league, and very few understood the fact that we do have a rich cycling history that dates back to the late 1800s, but very few Europeans knew that at that time. And as a matter of fact, Hubert Opperman, who was basically cycling's Donald Bradman, he went over to France in 1929 and 1930 and tried his luck during the primitive days of the Tour back then. So Australians have had a long history of competing at the Tour de France, but it wasn't until the mid-1990s when television started to get a grip on the race and started to broadcast the event right around the world. That's when people started to take notice on this event. This event that lasts 3 weeks, 21 stages. It's bizarre when you think about it. These guys ride over 3,500 kilometres, take on the longest stretches of road, climb the highest mountains, and finish in Paris in what is an incredible television spectacle. So that's what has caught the eye of non-European viewers since we started arriving. And when I say we, SBS started arriving in the mid to late 1990s. So at first we were a novelty, but then the people started to realise, hey, these guys are serious because their riders are starting to take our event seriously. And apart from turning up, they're winning and gaining different coloured jerseys as well. Yeah.
Look, it's fascinating. And, I think over the next couple of weeks, there's so many stories I'd love to hear from you around when you saw the curve turn and cycling really become something that was picked up by the Australian public as observers and consumers of the product, and love to hear about the personalities. But we're talking about two wheels, and joining us on the call this morning is a man who knows something else about achieving at the highest level on two wheels. And Tomo, I think you're far more qualified than me to have a chat with Troy. Welcome, Troy. You got us there, mate? He's waving, so can we get some audio from you, Troy? Okay, well, we'll keep working with that. CT will no doubt sort that out. Tomo, the question then, when did SBS realise that the audience wasn't going to be satisfied or was beyond sending out VHS tapes? There was too many. When did it become that you go, we've actually captured the interests of the Australian public?
Yeah, I think it was when the new wave of Aussie started to turn up. Robbie McHugh and Stuart O'Grady, I mentioned those names. They were winning stages. Robbie had to wait till 99, as a matter of fact, before he won his first stage in Paris on the final day. But prior to that, Stewie had got himself the yellow jersey for 3 days. And look, and I'll tell you somebody else who made a big impact for Australian audiences. It was Lance Armstrong. He returned to the tour in 99. He returned to the tour in 99 after testicular cancer. And he's the one who basically got a lot of Australians on bikes back in the early part of this century.
Well, you could talk for hours about that. And I know personally the event of Lance impacted upon you. But I think Troy's with us now. You got us, Troy?
I hope so.
Hello,
yeah,
Troy.
There you go, mate.
How you going,
all right,
team?
Tomo, you.
Hello, Troy. It's Mike Tomalaris. You can call me Tomo if you like. Everybody else does. Hey, what do we call you?
Just Troy. Plain old Troy, mate.
It's a very famous name in Australian sport. Let me tell you, we've been watching you at the Paralympics since 1996. Am I right?
Yeah, quite a while back.
I can't believe that. I can't believe that. No, I can remember you doing some damage to opponents. Let me explain who Troy Sachs is. He's a Paralympian. He's a Paralympic gold medalist for, what's the name of the team?
Wheelchair basketball, the Rollers, Australian men's wheelchair basketball team, and it's two-time gold medalist.
A two-time gold medalist, and that was in Atlanta in 96 and in Beijing in 2008, and you won the silver medal. Who beat you at Athens in 2004?
Yeah, you can't really say we won a silver medal. So we received a silver medal in Athens, and we were beaten by Canada. So don't forget, in basketball, there's a final, so there's only two teams in it. So we got last, really.
Well, Troy, what happened in Sydney in 2000?
With anything, you need a bit of luck, and I think we'd had no luck whatsoever. We lost 5 games by 2 points or less. In wheelchair basketball, there's 12 teams, 2 pools of 6, and then you play a round robin of 6 games. And then the top 4 teams in each pool play the crossovers. And we finished 4th in our pool and lost the crossover. So therefore we went into finish 5th. So there was a lot of pressure, and I don't think the players prepared as well as we did for 96. Also, too, I think being the defending gold medalists, we were the hunted and not the hunter, and I think it was just an enormous experience. And I think the enormity of the event, it just got to the team collectively, and also too, some of the players held on a bit long because it was the home Paralympics, whereas we might have brought in new players to lead up to that. But it was just one of those events that if the ball spun the other way in one of those games, we would have been in a different scenario. So you take the good with the bad, and that's why you've got to take your hat off to supreme athletes that in Sydney, Louise Savage and Kathy Freeman and those supreme athletes just thrived under that pressure where we collectively didn't.
Yeah, that was an incredible Sydney Olympics for many reasons, but not for the rollers. But look, let's just talk about yourself, Troy. We've got a lot of people from different backgrounds watching this broadcast and jumping on their two-wheel machines. But as far as you're concerned, I hope you don't mind me asking, look, you've been confined to a wheelchair from a very young age. Can I ask you how that came about?
Well, I'm an amputee, so I'm not confined to a wheelchair. So I've kind of got the best of both worlds. So I was born without the tibia, which is the shin bone. And I had a little gummy foot that was hanging around at the bottom, and it didn't really do anything. So at the age of 2.5, I had that amputated, and then I wore a prosthesis ever since. So for the last 42 years, I've been roaming the earth like a bit of an injured T-Rex with a prosthetic leg. I played able-bodied sport up until the age of 14, and then unfortunately during a soccer game broke my knee. And while I was in hospital, that's where there was a guy pushing around the wards, talking about spinal prevention awareness. So back, I was born down in Bulla on the south coast. So he was talking about not diving into waves, wearing helmets when you ride push bikes, and this was sort of mid 80s. So there wasn't people wearing helmets and that sort of stuff. So from that age, I got involved in wheelchair basketball. So for me, I've seen the differences in technology that have not only helped out amputees, but also wheelchairs. So from the age of 14, I played wheelchair basketball and was involved with a number of companies that use the technology to change the game, going from steel to aluminium and so forth.
Well, you made the Olympics for the very first time in Atlanta in 96. You were, 18 years of age? No,
yeah,
18 years of age. Yeah, so when did you realise, hey, I've got an opportunity of representing my country at Paralympic level?
I think when I first started playing wheelchair basketball, I was, 92, I was 15 when I went to my first Paralympics. And for me, it was like I was like a little kid in a candy store. Now, I was quite tall. I was 6'3" when I was 14, very skinny. And when I sat in the wheelchair for the first time, it was just like a light bulb moment. And I said, wow, I'm in an equal playing field. My arms, I got a wingspan, I'm 6'8", I'm tall in the torso, and I sit in this wheelchair, and I'm the tallest guy on the court. And also too, back in those days, there was only 13 people trialing for 12 spots. And because I was the tallest, I made the team, so it's so different now. But I think when I went to my first international tournament in 92 in Kentucky, and we played in a tournament with 100 teams. So over a week, we played 3 games a day. And I looked around, and America is the mecca for basketball and was back then for wheelchair basketball. And I sort of thought to myself, wow, this is pretty cool. I can actually hang, and I haven't really done anything yet. So from the 92 Paralympic Games, I was scouted to move to America and attend a college, the University of Wisconsin. And they had a full wheelchair basketball program within their college. So I moved there, and in training there and basically only focusing on basketball and study, I sort of grew some muscles and became what I was on the court. So I think for me, it was more to the point of, I can play the game, so let's just train harder than anyone else. And then it was my sanctuary too. So when I was on the court, there was nothing that could touch me. There was there was no bullying. There was no one saying you can't do this, or you shouldn't be playing soccer, or you shouldn't be playing basketball. It was like I was playing wheelchair basketball, and there's no rules. I can change the rules the way I see fit.
Yeah. Look, I'm sorry for assuming that you're confined to a wheelchair.
That's all right.
But the only time you're in a wheelchair is when you do play basketball?
Yeah, so any person with a disability really wants equality. And within wheelchair basketball, we have equality. So we have a classification system depending on your disability. So the most able people, which are amputees, knee replacements, we are 4.5, and then it goes down in half-point increments depending on your disability. So the most disabled individuals that would be paralysed from the chest down, they'd be a 1-pointer. 5 players on the court, points have got to equal 14. So therefore, you can't have, all your amputees. You've got to have a nice variety of players throughout the disabilities, and that's our equality system. So the only time I used a wheelchair was when I was actually training or playing, and hence when I first jumped in the wheelchair, I was absolutely useless. I had blisters the size of 50-cent pieces. And the way I got around that is I started to use a wheelchair. So I lived about 5 k's away from my high school, and I pushed my wheelchair to and from school to try and understand how it works. So I was at a disadvantage at the start, but I guess through perseverance and practice and training, everyone can sort of learn a new task.
Yeah, fantastic story. And I've got to say, having watched the Paralympics, the wheelchair basketball has to be the most spectacular, the most entertaining sport. It's probably up there. I mean, it's just as good, if not better, than anything that the Olympics can serve up in some cases.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for saying that. It's definitely, for me too, watching the game, it's I guess it's exciting, and what it does is there's athleticism in a different way, and there's skills, and for me, I like open-water basketball, obviously, but the Chicago Bulls, they used triangle offense, and trigonometry and mathematics are definitely used in wheelchair basketball with the picking and that. But when you get big, strong athletes that can shoot from far out, and also too that most of the guys that played they're not birth defects. They've had accidents, usually in their 19s, 20s, testosterone. So then you put them on a basketball court chasing a bit of pigskin. It's kind of like a recipe for disaster, especially at the Paralympic level where there's high speeds and high stakes, and now it's professional. So there's the guys that are out there, they're professional. They're training full time, and you add the Australian singlet or their own country singlet. They're playing for their livelihood. So it is a fantastic sport, and also I guess what it represents. It represents the full circle of an individual that has had an accident or had trauma and moved their way through their new cycles of life and got to a different pinnacle than what they first imagined maybe they would ever sort of touch their hands on.
Are you still involved in wheelchair basketball or with para athletes of any type?
Yes, I have a wheelchair basketball club called the Blues Wheelchair Basketball Club, and we provide an outlet for anyone that wants to play wheelchair basketball, all the way through from 5 to 6 year olds to we also own 2 National League licenses to play in the men's and women's national leagues. Myself, I am an exercise therapist. So I have clients that we use wheelchair basketball as an avenue to get back into life. And then also I coach the team. So I still love the game. I choose not to play it anymore because I think I could be of more value to coaching our younger generation. But I guess, it's for me, the grassroots are a real important part because I want to use the sport to have these younger kids realize that they're worthwhile. And sport has that, I guess, being involved in sport has that ability to give somebody self-worth regardless. Also, too, with the kids, we put their parents and their siblings in the chair because it's really the only sport that they can play with their able-bodied siblings and parents. So it also gives them an outlet to beat up on their brother or their sister or get back at mum and dad on an equal playing field.
Yeah. Hey, Troy, can I get your thoughts on where you think the Olympic movement is right now? I mean, there was a time not that long ago, actually, when cities around the world were clamoring over each other for a slice of hosting the Olympic pie. These days, it seems that's not the case. I know this year's Olympics, which have been deferred till next year, Tokyo was one of only a handful, perhaps 3 or 4 cities bidding, and the other bidders were lightweights by comparison. When's after Tokyo 24? Where is that? Paris 24?
I believe so. Yes.
I think Paris was only one of 2 cities bidding. It's obviously a very expensive exercise to host the Olympic Games and therefore the Paralympics afterwards. Where do you think the Olympic movement is right now? Is there a future?
I think, of course, there's a future, because I think no matter what an athlete says, the Paralympics and the Olympics are the epitome. It's once every 4 years. You have some sports that have a world championships every year. You have some sports that have 2 world championships in a year, short course, long course, and so forth. For me, I think the issue is that it's what is left after the Olympics and the Paralympic circus leaves. That's the issue. And the issue is that it gets left in a state of despair. And I would have to say that Sydney struggled maybe for a decade afterwards with the atmosphere gone, with the electric, all the people visiting and so forth. But sport itself, it struggles because there is so much focus on trying to win medals and money putting into it to be successful for your home games, that what happens is there's no thought for once it leaves.
Yeah.
There's no thought for 2 Paralympics or 2 Olympics ahead. It's more to the point of we're focusing only on Sydney and going from there. So also too, in this day and age, it's like the amount of money something costs to host that is a difficult situation.
Yeah. I mean, you look at cities like Athens and Rio. They were so excited at hosting the games, but you look at the facilities, go back to those cities today, and it's a ghost town.
They're white elephants, aren't they?
They're white elephants. Their facilities have turned into rubble. They've neglected for many reasons. I mean, the economic situations in those cities and countries have spiraled, and that's the reason I think why some cities these days are balking at the opportunity of hosting the Olympic Games. I hope we don't get to
sorry for interrupting. It's almost like some of these countries are bidding to hope that the Olympics or the Paralympics will, and predominantly the Olympics and the money that comes with it, will save their country, will give them an economic boost, will assist in changing a culture that has been there for hundreds of years, and it's not like, I remember going back to Athens and the simple fact that not having a working sewerage system within the village, is just diabolical. Not having grass within inside the village, it was just something that you didn't really see. It was half finished, and you go to the games that I went to that were phenomenal, which was Sydney, Beijing. And I went to London as a commentator and a member of the board of the Australian Paralympic Committee, and those 3 games were just phenomenal. And you look at the legacy that London has left, like they did it right, especially with the Paralympics. They had that Paralympic fund, and it's now the lottery, and it's funding the entire Paralympic movement within its country. So that left a legacy. So there was someone with a thought, and it might have been Seb Coe that had a thought that what's going to happen once the games are finished, we've got to actually focus on continuing to fund the sport, because we're putting so much money in the infrastructure that we're doing it. But then other countries, struggle with it also too. It's if countries see a failure, the Olympics past, and who knows what they're thinking. I've heard, I'm not too sure, but I don't follow it too much, but I think Brisbane is looking at trying to go for, is it 2028?
No, it's 32. It's Southeast 32. Queensland, which will take in Brisbane and the Gold Coast.
Okay, gotcha.
Do you think that's a good idea?
You know what? I will always follow my heart, and I think for any athlete, for any, I think quintessentially Australia needs sport. I think quintessentially we are a country that thrives on sport and loves sport. And if we go back to the heydays, and who doesn't love Dawn Fraser and those epic athletes of back in the day that gave us an identity and gave us a thing. And I think having another games in this country, we will do it right. Number one, hosting, obviously, but I also think that a new generation needs maybe a kick in the bum to get off their phones and get playing sport and get outside in our beautiful outside. You know, I've got 2 kids, and continuously, you know, we're not on screens, we're outside, we're bushwalking, we're riding our bikes, we're playing in the backyard and that sort of stuff. And maybe having a games in our country will encourage, you know, old Norman and Life Be In It with his bucket hat, get outside and sort of have a crack again and get some Australian pride back as well. I think we need some.
Troy, I just saw a little message pop up on my screen, and one of our riders who is looking at the screen right now, virtually riding down the coast of Thailand from the comfort of their garage or lounge room. And one of the questions is, who have you found to be inspirational in terms of basketball for yourself?
Yeah, for me, it's one of those ones that I always looked up to my brother and my father. You know, my father sort of came over from Germany when he was 18, and when he arrived, he wrote his mum a letter to say he was here, you know, to escape the clutches of the Germans. And I've always looked up to him for his work ethic. You know, he was a very, very tough man. And my
What's your ethnic background?
Both my parents are German. My father came out when he was 18. My mother was on a boat when she was 8, I believe. And then my brother, he's 2.5 years older, and there was never a tougher competitor. Never. You know, he continually, if we ever played basketball, stand-up basketball, he still gets his on me, and he's inches shorter. He's obviously heavier, which helps, but for me, you know, I looked at some Paralympic athletes and I took attributes from what they were doing. And back in the day when I started to play, tall guys in wheelchairs didn't shoot outside the key. And, you know, I played when nobody in wheelchair basketball shot 3-pointers. So I was like, well, isn't it easier to maybe push from one basket to the 3-point line and shoot and score and not have to go all the way to the basket? So I started shooting there. So for me, it wasn't about looking at one athlete. That obviously, you know, Michael Jordan, fabulous. You know, in basketball, Alonzo Mourning, he was a defensive stopper. You know, but other athletes, you know, I look at, you know, I admire Dawn Fraser, just the and not for what she did on the sporting field, but for the simple fact that the flag incident. You know, it was, she didn't want to dominate, but she didn't steal the flag. She didn't want to dominate him.
Okay.
And how much integrity does that take? So for me, and now when I'm not actually playing the sport, I look at people that do things like Hands Across the Water, in philanthropic work and so forth. And, you know, I've got a young boy who's 5 and I've got a daughter who's 13, and I'm trying to teach them that sometimes the people that are in the media aren't the people that we should be following, because there's everyday heroes that walk next to us that do tremendous things without getting acknowledged or not wanting to be acknowledged. And I think that's the everyday hero for me. So, you know, my father was his tremendous work ethic. My brother, who was my biggest competitor, my mum, who was always there for a cuddle, no matter what the score was that was really, really big, especially leaving home when I was 16 to go to America.
Yeah, very well said. Beautifully said, Troy. Fantastic. But do you follow the NBA these days?
I love the NBA. I feel a bit lost without it being on, but everyone's struggling with the favourite sport. Yeah, I do love the NBA, and I guess I don't. I love the Celtics. I played for the Bulleye Police Citizens Youth Club back in the day for able-bodied basketball, and we were called the Celtics. So as a young fella, I loved Larry Bird and Robert Parrish and all the Celtic legends. For my 40th, actually, my brother and I, we followed the Celtics for 2.5 weeks, and it was the dream of a lifetime, just to be on a train in a plane and following them, and we got to watch 5 or 6 games. So I like the NBA. I'm not necessarily like where the game is going, because athleticism has taken over, but then we get the Europeans that come with tremendous fundamentals and lack of jumping skills. So that brings brings the base back. But I like the speed, the tenacity, and obviously basketball. You know, my kids always say, if I'm watching TV, it's basketball, and you know, they're like they both don't play the sport.
Oh, really? Well, I heard and read this morning that how many more weeks are there left in the NBA, the suspended NBA season?
I'm not sure, but what I've read is they're going to try and start on the 31st of June or something, and they're going to go to Disneyland to play 8 weeks.
In Florida.
Yeah, so everyone's in this little bubble, and they're going to play 8 weeks of competition to sort out the playoffs. Then they'll play. I think they're going to find there's going to be some athletes that are going to get injured. You know, I just think, or one person catches it, and then it just goes right through it. So,
what makes you say that?
Because they've been off for so long, and they're you know, a lot of players use the facilities that the teams have to train, and they have their trainers help them. So whether they've all been training the way they should have been, or whether they've been taking time off, or whether they've been able to train, have trainers come to their houses, that sort of stuff, you just don't know. You know, you look at some athletes that are being injured within our own sports in Australia, you know, from AFL and from NRL that sort of haven't been able to use the facilities because the facilities have to be shut down. So it's you know, me from my exercise therapy background, you sort of think, well, have you been training at the right intensity? Did you take a break after the season finished and then tried to ramp it back up? Are you at the stage where you can be playing the amount of minutes at the intensity that you're meant to play? Are they going to play more games than they normally would? There'd be less travel, but you know, all those things obviously needed to be taken into account. I did read yesterday an article that Michael Jordan wasn't in favour of this type of season because he's concerned for the athletes in such a confined space as well. But then again, what do you do?
Do you call it off?
Well, you know, my opinion is everything should have just been pressed pause. But then again, I'm not a politician, or I'm not a broker in the game that says, well, if we don't play, we're broke. There's nothing for next time. Yeah. You know, for me personally, it's just, it's a very difficult situation. I'm really glad something like this is happening, especially for Pete and his organisation, you know, because these are the organisations that really suffer.
Yeah. We've got 5 minutes to go. So those on bikes doing the virtual challenge, keep going. 5 minutes to go. Troy, I just want to ask you about Kobe Bryant and that tragic death, and whether you're into basketball or not, I think his passing really hit a nerve for all of us. The way he and his daughter and those others on board that helicopter died. Do you think his passing will leave a huge hole in the game of basketball?
I think not just basketball. You know, if you sort of watched what he was about, and obviously he had, you know, his mentor and baseline was Michael Jordan. So he had a demigod to follow or to try and beat. But what he's done since he's finished playing sport was you know, pretty tremendous. Academy Award, Emmy, and also too what he started to create with the Mamba mentality. You know, if you read a lot of the articles or follow the Mamba mentality, that sort of stuff, what he was doing with athletes at his academies was transcending sport from sport to sport. So there was footballers there was lacrosse players, there was a lot of different people there, because it wasn't about the sport itself. It was about a mental attitude. It was about a fundamental culture of how you live your life and how you prepare. And regardless what area you are in, business, parenting, sport, you know, you can go back to the warriors of the Japanese way, and they used to do everything with 110% focus and quality, and they were in the moment, here and now, and not thinking about anything else, and not trying to multitask. It was when you were making soup, and Kobe lived that every day of his life. And I think what he was doing through his Mamba mentality program was trying to teach that. You know, it's you don't just become great in life by just doing it once. It's doing it over and over, and every second of every minute of every hour of every day of every week of every month of every year. And that's how you become great at something and continually to be great.
Yeah, you know, Muhammad Ali, I think, followed that scenario. He was a great athlete, of course, but after that, he was so big into human rights, and we all listened. We all listened to him, didn't we?
Yeah, oh, exactly. He used his platform for good, and yeah, he had something to say, and he was articulate enough to say it too.
Well, that's so true. I've got a colleague of mine, Craig Foster, who's a former Socceroos player.
Yep.
He's 50 years of age. He just qualified as a lawyer only last year. But what he's doing now for human rights is quite incredible. You might remember last year, Hakeem, who was stuck in a Thai jail from Bahrain. Fozzie, as we call him, got him out and has saved him from certain death. And Hakeem these days is living in Melbourne. So if you've got a platform and you can articulate what you're all about, you can get results. And Muhammad Ali, Kobe Bryant, and in my case, Craig Foster have proven that.
Yeah, fantastic.
So listen, tell us about the future of the Rollers, Tokyo next year. Are they good enough to win it all?
Oh, my heart says yes, my head says no.
Why is that?
Players, I think the players on the team. I also think the generation has changed. I think the work ethic has changed, and also too the game and timing. You know, athletes in different countries are bigger, faster, and stronger. And also too, they're playing the way that the Rollers used to play, and right now we don't have any super powerful 4.5s. We play more of a mid-range game. But then again, you know, if the ball bounces the right way, then the boys will be in with the mix, and my heart says hopefully they will be, you know. But my head says I don't believe so.
Okay, well, they're very interesting. Listen, it's been great talking to you today, and congratulations on a fantastic career, and the way you articulate those different subjects that we spoke about just now. Fascinating. I found the interview quite fascinating. Well done. Congratulations.
Thanks for your time. Awesome.
Claire, you're there.
I am still here. Thank you, Troy. Thank you, Tomo. Apologies for those little glitches there, but I think we've done pretty well this week. So yeah, appreciate both of your time this morning. So we are coming to the end of day 5, and another great day on the bike. Don't forget to log your kilometres in my virtual mission. So 25 kilometres for this morning's ride. And if you wanted to check out any of the interviews or any of the footage from this week, just head to our YouTube playlist, and you can download those there. Look, this afternoon, if you feel like jumping on again, we are going to be joined by a really special guest. So one of Australia's best comedians, Vince Sorrenti. So we'll obviously be recording this session as well, but if you want to see a bit of banter between our founder Pete and Vince, then I recommend jumping on. And the cycling will continue into the weekend. So we've got 2 sessions tomorrow. And then we have a break on Sunday. How wonderful is that? But you could always get out on your bike and go for a ride out in the beautiful fresh air. So look, have a wonderful Friday, and don't forget to tag us in any photos that you might have from this morning's ride. Jump on the Facebook page, have a chat, and yeah, we'll see you either Friday lunchtime or we'll see you tomorrow. Okay. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again soon. Thanks, Tomo.